Debbie had surgery the last of August, so she was laid up for a while, and I was over there through September and quite a lot of October, off and on, helping with the wash and getting meals and so forth before she was able to get back around again. During that time, too, Mr. Wilson was very bad. He was in the hospital all through September and October, and he died the last of October. That was hard on Mrs. Wilson. She had never been alone. There'd always been other people in the house, so it was especially hard for her. And they brought them home because Kevin was going to be ordained. Kim hadn't seen Cindy in a long time, so she wanted to go up and see her while she was there, so I rode up with her. That was nice. I enjoyed Benjamin. He's such a cutie. The ordination was very nice. I had been to other ones, but of course this one was more of interest to me because of one being ordained. It was a very impressive service, especially interesting because he was so well known. Sometimes the one being ordained isn't known too well by the ones doing the service, but he was, since it had been the church he had been pastor of in Penfield there. Bruce and Aaron and Debbie came up to the service. Kathy was coming, but she still was not feeling well from her surgery in the summer. I had the Thanksgiving meal as usual. Dick's family stayed over at Dick's house because there was just too many of them to join in with our group now. But we had a real nice time with Bruce and Jerry and Deb's family all came, and the boys' girlfriends all came. So we had 2 tables full as usual. But it was nice. We heard that, next we heard that Arlene and Paul had a baby boy born December 14th, named Zachary Hunter. That was nice to hear. He was a healthy little baby, they said. On December 23rd, Aaron called and said that Noel had a baby boy named Cameron Carl. So that was nice. Those 2 little cousins would be so close of an age if they ever lived close enough to enjoy each other. That would really be nice. I was over to Debbie's on my birthday for a dinner that she had the neighborhood ladies all in, but it was on my birthday, so they had a cake for me, and they each gave me a card. So on the 23rd, Bruce and Kathy and Jerry invited me up there to supper. I enjoyed that a lot. They gave me my birthday gifts, and they quite often invited me up for supper when Jerry came home. He was always away a lot. So that always is something that I remember nice about that. On the 27th, we had our Christmas at Debbie's as usual. There were 38 there this year. It's always about that number. It was very nice. My big gift that year was a promise to put new siding on my cottage at Chambers. I was so pleased over that. About this time, we heard that Schweitzer had died. That would be hard for Eva. None of us went. They weren't going to have a funeral service, she said, just a burial, so but we had all been there to see him so many times, so it was sad, but nothing we could do about it. I always like to do that. I was there alone, but that doesn't... New Year's Eve, I watched the ball fall. I always enjoyed doing that. I'm alone there, but I always enjoy it. It's just something that I look forward to when I don't have a watch night service at church. For Chris to move in. It's been a good year, and God has been good. In January, early part, I got the house ready to leave. Kathy and David came down to say goodbye. Debbie came and got me, and we met Dick and Jerry in Corning. We had a real good trip. I always enjoy Dick and Jerry. I always find things at Pat's to keep me busy getting supper started and doing up the dishes and so forth. I also like the Sunday school here. Mrs. Bell, the returned missionary that we've had ever since I've been here, is a teacher, and she's especially good. This school where the Crines go, once a year have a tournament where they invite 7 other basketball teams, some from North Carolina and others from South Carolina, for the tournament. We always go to those games, and they're very excited. Rachel is a cheerleader now. Ingrid has been, and of course Scott played on the team when he was back in school. So it was always interesting. I've always gone to them. This year, Southside won the tournament. The first time they'd won in 14 years. So that was really exciting. Early in March, Dick called that they were going to Florida, and I could go with them and stay with Eva while they went around and visited their friends. So I did that. I went with them. We stopped at Jean, Shirley and Shirley's for a minute, and then went to Nabolt's and called on them. Then we went to Eva's. She was, of course, alone now that Spite was gone, and so that was nice. We had good visits and had a good time there. And Dick and Jerry were gone for a while, and then they came back and picked me up, and we went up through and started back north and stopped at Brooksville again, and we stayed overnight at Nabolt's. I did in the house, and of course Dick and Jerry stayed in their camper. We started early in the morning. There was a terrible storm in the night. Electricity was off all night. It was dark in the morning. Mrs. Nabolt's was embarrassed and apologized, and we laughed at her because she wasn't in control of the electricity. But she felt it was awful that she didn't have a bright light for us to eat breakfast. But we started, and the wind was blowing a gale, and it was snowing, but we said, well, if we get a little farther north, it probably is just a storm right here. But it wasn't. It was a terrible storm all the way up through. There were cars over the bank, and there was no electricity, no gas stations open. He was fortunate that he'd found one and filled up before that station closed, and we kept going. And we got to we saw a town where there was a a motel sign open. Most motels were closed because, of course, there was no electricity. I don't know how this one come to be open, but it was. So we went in there, and we had an awful time getting in because the wind had blown. All the driveways were closed, and you had to go down a steep stairway to get to it, but there was no stairs. It was just a steep bank. Dick and Jerry got me one on each side of me and helped me down, and we made it to get in. And we were so grateful because it was so cold. It was cold in the camper even. So we got in there. It was warm and clean. It was run by black people, and we were the only ones there, so I guess they were glad to see us. We stayed there overnight, and we came home the next day. We came around by Augusta instead of up through Atlanta like we usually would. And we got home about 3 in the afternoon. It was a bad storm. The whole East Coast was affected. We thought it was just there. For a long time after that, the newspapers and television talked about the blizzard of '93. It was a bad storm, all the East Coast affected. I forgot to say, while I was at Eva's visiting, Swaite's brother and his wife were there, and they were Pleasant Gator in the creek right by Eva's house. And she would say, well, what do you want to look at that ugly old thing for? We didn't especially love him or anything, but we were interested. We didn't see alligators every day, and we just liked to watch him. He didn't do anything but sleep, but it still was interesting to us. His name was Elbert. I stayed at Pat and Bob's the rest of the time till it was time to come home. There was always nice things going on there. They entertain a lot, and at that time they had fellowships in the homes, and there'd be 2 or 3 other couples and children if they had children. Usually there wasn't. They were older people usually. But they had them, and we always prepared the main dish, and they each bring like salad or dessert or whatever. So it was a pleasant evening, and they did that once a month, and it was always enjoyable to have those people there. I met so many different nice people that way. Bruce and Aaron were over in Texas where Paul was stationed visiting, and they called that they'd be here to pick me up Tuesday. So I packed my suitcase and got all ready, and we came home, had a good trip home. The car bothered some on hills, but it was a good trip home. When I got there, the boys, David and Isaac, came down to see me, and Kathy stopped and visited quite a while. Deb came over because Phil was plowing the field across the road, so she had to come pick him up, and so I got to see her. And it was so nice to be back home again. It was getting to be nice weather, and so I could be outside some. Evelyn Rao, my good friend in Haskellville, came down to see me. She's always been so faithful as a friend. And I called on Charlotte Weaver, and it was nice to be back at home where all the people were that I know. They had a good Mother's Day program at church, and I enjoyed that. I went over to Deb's again. She was sick, so I did up her work, and she stayed in bed and rested because she had to go for more tests for her mail carrier job. And so she wanted to feel better, so she rested, and I did up the work for her. So glad I could do that. She's done so much for me. Cheryl built a new back porch, and the boys raked out a place where I had a few things planted last year, and I planted some hills of beans and onion sets and about 3 tomato plants. That was going to be all I wanted. I had gone with Evelyn over to the Amish people and bought these plants and some flowers for the cemetery boxes. So that was nice to have the boys around there doing things. I always enjoyed them so much. Kathy was cleaning out the flower bed in front of the house by the large tree, and she uncovered the old millstone that my grandfather had brought up there way back before the large tree was set out in 33. Well, it would have been before we went to Hornell back in the early 20s. So it was nice to have it. It was from the original mill, the big round stones that they ground the feed with, and before they had the machinery to grind it, they just had these stones, big millstones that they used to grind the feed. And so it's still there. I can see it now all the time. I was so glad that Kathy weeded it out good and so we could see it. I went with Lucy and Juanita to the Family Life Center ladies' luncheon. That's always nice to go to. That get to see people from other areas around that you don't see very often. They have a good program each time, and then, of course, a nice meal, too. Pat and Bob got up to Deb's. They were coming for Dan's graduation. That was going to be another fun time for us all. We always look forward to seeing them, and of course proud of Dan that he's graduating. Dan had to have both prayers at the graduation since they can't have a minister pray. They have to have a layman, and nobody else wanted to do it, so Dan did both of them, the beginning and the end. It was a lot for a young kid, but he's a strong Christian, and it wasn't any big problem to him. It's so nice to have Chris living next door. She stops in every once in a while, and she and Kathy enjoy each other a lot. Kathy needs to walk for her back, and so she and Chris go for walks quite often. That's nice. Deb's is working quite a little bit at the post office now and on the mail route. She has a lot of health problems, so I try to help her with the work when I can. And Pat's there to help now that she's up for the graduation. So that's a big help to Debbie. She's getting ready for the party and all that. We planned bees to go work at the camp, putting on the new siding for Wednesday and Thursday before graduation on Friday. They all were there to help. Bruce came both days and brought his saw and sawed all the lengths of the siding as they measured it and told him the measure. And he'd take it around to him, go back and saw another bunch for those 2 days. David and Isaac and other kids came and helped. And they did odd jobs around. Lots to do on a day like that. Lloyd put screen on all the windows and put a screen on the new door. I bought screen and he did that. Robin painted the screen doors and I painted some screen doors. and screens for the windows. And the men did the big work, putting on the siding. That was a nice day. We had a big picnic dinner there, so that made it nice. And I stayed all night there. Some of them came back home. Most of them, in fact, came back home and then came back early the next morning. It was a very nice time. I've always remembered that. There was just one thing bad that happened. They were all finished and had to come back, but there was just a little bit more to do, so Bob and Dick said they would go back early Friday morning and do that. And so the rest of them all came home and stayed home. But while they were there, for some reason, Dick's ladder slid into Bob's ladder, so they both went crashing to the ground. Dick broke some ribs and Bob broke his wrist, and they were both in so much pain. I didn't know anything about this. And when they got to the party after the graduation for Dan, I found out that Dick was in such awful pain he finally had to leave with broken ribs, of course, and Bob's wrist was all wrapped up, so he wasn't painting right then, but he had been, of course. It was too bad. Everything went so perfect. The house was all finished, and everything was fine except that, but of course they weren't seriously injured. It was just a very painful injury. The graduation was real nice. Dan got a lot of awards and honors, and like they always do at a graduation. We enjoyed it all so much. As I said, I didn't even know about the broken bones, so I enjoyed it all. I would have felt awful if I'd known that, but of course they were nice and kept it from me. Camp time was there upon us again, and I went with, and Carolyn Lloyd stayed in the cottage with me. It was real nice. The only thing that was bad was the temperature was 190 or 90 most every day. It was no breeze much. It was just a very hot time. They held a conference over in the Victory Highway Church, but the evening services were held there at Chambers. And so, but it was all right, and we enjoyed it all. It was time for the summer picnic again. That was set for the last of July. Dick and Jerry came over with their camper and stayed all night Saturday, so to be here for it Sunday. Sunday morning was a special service up to our church because Lee and Noel and Paul and Arlene both had their babies there, and they were dedicated in that service. It was a very nice service. And, Arlene's mother and Lee's mother both came to the service. And then we all came home and had our picnic at our house. There were 40 there. It was a nice crowd, and we enjoyed it all. Eva called that she was in New York State, and she was down to Hammondsport then, visiting friends down there, and that she wanted to come up. So Bruce went and got her, and she was here for quite a long time visiting, and Linda and Ralph came over for meals, and the kids came in to see her, and it was a nice long time that she was here. At this time, Dick and Jerry had their 40th wedding anniversary celebration. So we went over to that with Bruce. It was nice. Their whole family was there, and Eva hadn't seen any of them in a long time. She enjoyed it all. Kara and Stephen were there, and I gave them their quilt, and they seemed real pleased with that. It was nice to see all those, and we got to see Carol's husband, and we hadn't met him. Or at least not seen him many times. I don't know if we'd met him before that or not. Eva went over to Linda's and stayed a few days, and then she came back to my house, and I invited Juanita up, and some of her girls are there visiting, so they came up. Gerald came in. He hadn't seen Eva in a long time either. So it was real nice. The Alderman picnic was held down to the Hammonds, or the Painted Post area in a picnic ground there. Oh, there was a nice crowd there, and Eva went to see all of them again. And Harold came and to get his mother, and she went back up to his house with them. Harold lived in Oswego. He's lived there ever since he was married. Chris was up quite often. It was so nice to have her. Maria stayed with her, and she enjoyed that a lot. And then Maria decided to go to New Hampshire to New Mexico to school. She felt bad over that because she knew she was going to miss her a great deal. Thanksgiving time was coming, and I planned the Thanksgiving dinner as usual. Dick and Jerry were in South Carolina, where he was teaching again. Fall was upon us again. And the last of October, it snowed, real deep snow. Schools were closed. It was unusual. They hadn't got the plows all out or anything ready yet, so it was a bad time. November came, deer season opened. The family from Pennsylvania came up to stay at Jerry's again to hunt with them. And the lady went to church with Kathy and I. That was nice. We went up with the I did all I could to get ready for Thanksgiving dinner ahead of time. Had tables all set and all that, like I always did, and peeled the potatoes the night before. I roasted the turkey, took the dressing out and put it in the refrigerator, and had it all ready to slice the next day. Dick and Jerry were down in South Carolina, so they weren't coming. And Leah and Noel were here for dinner, and the regular ones, Debbie's and Jerry's and Bruce's. It was nice to see them all. Dick was going over to Pat's and have Thanksgiving with her. I worked on Christmas gifts to get things ready and went shopping down at the mall to get the rest of my gifts for the little grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so forth. Christmas Day, I was snowed in. I couldn't go anywhere, and so I called Debbie and said I wouldn't be over. she sent Matt over after me, so I had Christmas dinner with them, and Christmas morning we opened the gifts like we always do there at Debbie's house, and they have a lot of fun exchanging just their family gifts and opening their stockings, and they always have a stocking for me that I enjoy too. The get-together was the next day after Christmas there at Deb's. It was still very deep snow a lot of places, so the whole family didn't get there, but there was a nice crowd. We had a good time, just like we always do. Such wonderful families I have. I'm so grateful for them. They're so considerate and thoughtful and so happy to be together. It's a very nice time each year. Dick and Jerry, of course, are there because they came up from South Carolina for the Christmas, and they said I could ride back with them. So that was nice because they have the camper, and it's pleasant to ride back in that. So we started back on January 3rd. We had a real good trip down. It's always fun to go with Dick and Jerry. They're lots of fun, and we ate most of our meals in the camper, but we stopped a couple times to eat, and it was real nice. We stayed all night someplace in Virginia. I forgot the name of it. And then we got there okay at their place in Central. I stayed there for about 3 weeks. I always enjoy being there because I know some of the people. I've met them other years, and I've also know them from New York too. And we play games and work puzzles, and I enjoy their church. There was deep snow in New York, very cold weather. I kept hearing from the family how cold it was. Debbie's having a hard time because of the deep snow. She has to get out and shovel out some of the mailboxes. Be glad when she gets a job inside. It'll be so much better for her. I came back to Pat's for a while and I always enjoy being here. It's a nice place and there's beautiful weather. Usually this was a cold time, and the early part of February was real cold, but it's usually nice here, and certainly a lot better than New York when it comes to weather. Pat and Dick and Jerry were going to go back to Florida, and they asked me to go with them later, so I planned to do that. They were also going to go to the children's home in Georgia where they had helped before, and I was interested in seeing that too, so I went with them there, and we stayed there a while, and he heard about the plans for the new place that they'd bought and the new building that they were going to make, buildings they were going to make there. Then we went on to Eva's, or I did. They called on other people in Florida. Harold and his wife were there at Eva's. I enjoyed them. Albert the alligator was still very interesting to me. Eva always couldn't see why on earth I wanted to look at that horrid thing, but I always found it interesting. Then I came back to Pat's. They were a family from New York here visiting, people I had already met in Saugerties. And so I enjoyed them a lot. They were real friendly people, and they had come down because Alva Cody was very, very bad, and he was one of their close friends. In fact, Bob's old boss when he worked in New York, and he lived in near Atlanta now, and he was very bad, so they had come down just to see him, and they stayed at Pat and Bob's. That was interesting. I enjoyed them a lot. About this time, we heard that Lloyd was going to go to Germany and work for a company over there. Carolyn was feeling a lot of stress over being over running the business all alone and running her household all alone, because she never had, but I was sure she'd be able to do it. She's very capable. Tom and Trudy, Bob's sister, came after the other couple left. They came for a visit. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed Trudy a lot. She's always so interesting to talk to. So I had a pleasant winter here. All different people here to visit, and time I spent with Pat and Bob and so forth. Bruce called that they were going to come home and that I could ride home with them, and they'd come around this way. They were down in Texas now. So that's what I did. I rode home with them. We had a nice trip home. They took me to my house and got me all settled, and all was well. Carolyn called and said she'd be be here for the weekend. And that was going to be nice. I was looking forward to seeing her, and she got here Friday night, and we had a good time. Chris came up and visited a while Friday night and Saturday. It was nice weather, and Carolyn went for walks up the road and around like she always did when she was a kid. And there was baby calves to see, and Chris's horses and so forth. So it was an interesting time for her, and we had a real good time. She stayed till Sunday night, so that meant she could go to church with me and so forth. I enjoyed it all. Walk when she's down here, and it was nice weather. My car acted up a lot, and always is acting up. And Bruce is always so faithful to fix it for me. I just couldn't have a car if I didn't have Bruce, because it would cost a fortune to keep it running unless I had him to put in the new parts and fix things that come unhooked and so forth. He's always so good. About this time, we heard that Kevin and Cindy had a baby girl, born the 12th of April. The baby had a bad birthmark over a large part of her body, but it wasn't on her face, just the main trunk part of her body. It was going to require many, many operations. As I look back on it now, I think we never knew how much that poor little girl had to suffer to get that birthmark removed. They said it had to be removed because it would turn cancerous, so there was no doubt about leaving it. It was time for Debbie's birthday, so I had them over for Sunday dinner for her birthday. It was nice. We had a nice dinner and a nice time. And we heard just about now that the Wesleyan women of Penfield Church had put together money and bought a ticket for Carolyn to go to Germany and back to be with Cindy through this stressful time. They thought there couldn't be a nicer gift for Carolyn than to spend time with Cindy, and for Cindy too. Oh, that was so nice of them, and it was so good for Carolyn and Cindy. Chris's mare had a colt about this time. That was exciting, because this is the first colt she'd had since they'd had the horses here on the Pauling farm. So we'd all been looking forward to it, and it was an interesting thing. I didn't get to see it for quite a while, but because they kept it in the barn at first, but when it got out the pasture, then I got to see it. It was a cute little thing running around down there. Come on. Oh, where is that? I don't even know what I do. About this time, Noelle called up and wanted to know if she could have Morgan's birthday party in my front yard, because there'd be more room and it was an easier place to get than down where she lived. And so I was very glad to have them up here. That way I could enjoy it. Lee's mother and Arlene's mother came. Arlene and Zachary were up visiting at that time, so they came and they had a real good time. And Noelle got the whole meal, what they had ready, and the little kids had a lot of fun. They blew bubbles and the little kids chased them and chased them. I never realized kids could have so much fun with bubbles. That was a nice time, and I enjoyed it all so much. It was time for Matt's graduation now. We went to the baccalaureate service, and I helped Debbie ready for Matt's graduation party. It was real nice. The graduation was real nice. Matt had both the prayers again, just like Dan did, and he got some awards. And the party was very nice. They always are. It was a nice crowd there. All of Debbie's and Phil's family, and some of my family, and of course kids that Matt knew and so forth. It was time for camp again. And the cottage was full this time, because Andy and Heidi came with their little kids, and Karen Clamo was there. She had charge of the crafts, so she was staying there, and of course Carol and Lloyd were there. So it was nice. I enjoyed it all. I always like it when there's a full cottage there. Mr. Bentz said that he saw a bear on the pig road. They said there had been bears on the Mattoon Road several times, and even on Kathy's and Jerry's driveway. Kathy said, everybody sees them but me. I never get to see a bear, and that's the way with me. I've never seen a bear. They're right around there, though, but they don't seem to make any problem as long as people leave them alone. The bridge by Helen and Earl's house was being replaced, so all the traffic had to go up Pig Road and around and out through Haskinville, and it was going that way. So there was a lot of extra traffic by my house right then. Gerald was in and out quite a lot. He brought me fresh vegetables from the people he sprays for, like zucchini and yellow squash and tomatoes and cucumbers. I always enjoyed them. They're so nice, and it was nice to have him pop in once in a while. Chris came up and brought me a book on the history of Avoca. In there was a picture of the old mill dam and the mill. Of course, the mill was there long after we moved back here and were the beans, and I just enjoyed them so much. They didn't make very many, and it was just enough so that was gone. So I was interested in seeing those pictures, and Jerry took them and got some copies made, so that was nice. It was in a book that Tom's mother made. She was a historian for the town. The beans, and I just enjoyed them so much. They didn't make very many, and it was just enough so I could pick myself a mess of beans and have them completely fresh. I enjoyed them a lot. Robin was in a play over at Holton, Oklahoma, and so Collins were going, and they asked me to ride along with them, so I went to see that play. It was nice. She had a singing part mainly, but she had some lines. And of course, it's a very familiar play that we've seen any other times, so it was enjoyable. Phil's 40th birthday was coming up, so she wanted to have a funny party for him. She bought black napkins for the table, and she hung black drapes around the house, and they brought the craziest gifts. It was a complete surprise party. She took him out for supper on the pretext that was his birthday supper. And while they were gone, the whole crowd came. There was a big crowd of people there. I don't know the exact number, but it was a big crowd. And they bought the most comical gifts. All kinds of things like broken false teeth and canes so that he'd have something to walk with, and a lot of funny things like that. We always laughed at all them. And the cards were ridiculous, making out he was about 90. It was a lot of fun. Cindy had to come to the United States to go to different doctors here to confer about the surgery on the baby. The German doctors were real sure that they could handle it, but they thought that they should come and confer with New United States doctors. And she did. She went to several, and they all agreed that what Germany was going to do was fine. And it would be ever so much simpler for them if they could have it over there, because she would just have to come here in the States and stay with the baby, and he'd have to run the mission and the kids all alone. It was really good that she could have it there in the States. And then, as it ended up, they had 18 operations, but at that time, we didn't know that. Dan was going to Roberts Wesleyan to college, and so he was to leave along this part of September. I went over and helped Debbie. We made a lot of cookies so he could take some of them with him when he went. And Chris came up about then and said that they were going to be married, she and Tom, and invited me to go with them when they were married. They weren't going to have a wedding, just go and get married. So Tom's parents came and picked me up, and I went with them, and the 4 girls were there, and they sang all kind of crazy songs to them. It was a lot of fun. It was very relaxed because it was not so proper like a church wedding would be. Chris and Tom went to a motel for overnight. They didn't go on a wedding trip at that time. That was the 3rd of November. Virginia Preston Francis was, and we heard, was very bad, having to have dialysis every day. I hadn't realized how bad she was. I was sorry that I hadn't been in to see her. I could have. Just didn't hear how sick she was. About this time, the doctors found that I had a hernia that would need surgery. So on the 18th of November, I went and had that taken care of. Kathy and Debbie both took turns. One of them brought me. The other came when I was just out of the surgery. So, and Jerry was in, and both pastors were in. I was well taken care of, and I wasn't there only a few days. I got along just fine. Juanita came several times. On the day I was to go home, there was a very bad storm, deep snow. Deer season was on, so the roads were full of people traveling and going deer hunting, but Matt came to get me, and he said that there's cars all over the road and across the road and over banks and everything. The storm come on so fast, and it was icy, but we got home okay. He's a good driver, no problem. Thanksgiving Day, Debbie got to dinner this year, of course. But I was able to help her some, and I could sit up to the table to eat. I was real pleased. I didn't think I could get well that quick, but I did. Dan and Phil had both gotten deer. Debbie was very busy. She was working all the time. But I was able to help her. I could fill the dishwasher and I could fold clothes. I was able to get, of course, I said, the Thanksgiving dinner. And then when I got well enough, I went back home, set up my Christmas tree. Isaac came and got my tree out and helped me set it up. And I went to the mall and to Cornell and so forth and did my Christmas shopping for all that I had done. I'd made a great deal of my Christmas, but I still had great-grandchildren and grandchildren to buy for. Dick and Jerry came, and they stayed all night and slept in the camper. And we went to Ponderosa for my birthday. That was nice. I went up to Jerry and Kathy Christmas morning and opened my gifts up there with them. When it came time to have the Christmas get-together, Pat was there, so she got the Christmas things all ready. Debbie had to work, but she got home and time was ready to serve the dinner, and there was a nice crowd of people. We had a good time. Always a good time. I got a chance to talk to them all, see the new babies and see the older children as they grow. It's so nice I can have this every year that I get a chance to see my children. Most of them could come. It was New Year's Eve again. I didn't see the ball fall. I intended to, but I went to sleep and missed it. That was a little thing that I was sorry to miss it. But I've had a good year, and I'm just so grateful for my family and for all that people do for me all the time. Such a good life I lead. Yeah. Sunday was New Year's Day. It was a quiet day. Dick and Jerry called that they'd be here next week to pick me up and to stay all night at my house. Carolyn called that Brianna was through with another surgery and was doing okay. I keep thinking of poor Cindy, what a strain all this is on her, having to leave the other children home and staying at the hospital with Brianna, as she has to do. I ordered a new roll of stamps. They were 32 cents this time, quite a jump from 29. Evelyn called and invited Charlotte and I to supper. We had such a nice evening. She's a good friend. I always have enjoyed her so much. I went to Deb's one day and baked up some batches of cookies for her. She's so busy all the time. Dick and Jerry came Monday night, and we left at 6 o'clock on Tuesday. Dick and Jerry came down. And Jerry and Kathy came down, and also Chris came up. She's going to be lonesome with Maria gone, and that's nice for her to have someplace just to stop in and visit while she's down there alone so much. We had a real good trip down, no problem. It's always enjoyable to go with Dick and Jerry. We got to Pat's, and she was busy as always. She had a student teacher this year. It makes her extra work, but she enjoys it, so they always ask her to do it, and she does it. I enjoy their church. I enjoy their Bible study. That's during the middle of the week, so Pat can't go, but I went. Other ladies picked me up. It was on different, less known women of the Bible. Very interesting studies and things that we wouldn't have read about before. I received letters from the folks back north. Kathy wrote that Isaac was enjoying his senior year. He'd made 11 points in a basketball game, and that would make him happy. In March, Dick called and said they were going to Hepzibah and that I could go along. So I planned to go, went with them. Geraldine always worked in the office when she was down there. So much paperwork for the setup like that. And Dick did everything. They had bought a wooded area to make into a new campground and with buildings and dorms and schoolrooms and so forth. So there was a amount of work to do. So Dick cut trees and dug ditches and laid pipeline and did all the manual labor that's required, and he enjoyed it thoroughly. He'd come home at night all covered with mud and looking so tired, but he enjoyed it. It was something different. All over the United States, people sent Campbell soup labels in there. And it was our job to put them in packs, cut them down to a certain size, and then put them in packages of 100. And they were mailed to a certain place. It took better than 1 million of them to get one of the vans that they got with them to transport the kids around to different activities they had to go to. So it took a lot of soup labels. I did those. They brought them over to the house where we stayed, and I did those. I enjoyed that. And it was satisfying work. I remember one day I did 1,200. And I did a lot of them while I was there. As I said, it took 1 million, so I needed a lot of them. David had joined the Marines, and Kathy wrote that he'd left for his basic training at Parris Island. As soon as school was out where Dick was teaching, he was going to start home, and he said it'd be the first part of May. So I planned to go back with them. We started and had some trouble with the camper off and on. It just didn't work. It kept stalling and bothering, and when we got to High Point, it quit entirely, and we were right in the busiest intersection. People were honking and backing up and pulling around us all for a while, and it was sort of noontime, so it was a busy time of day to be stuck in the middle of traffic in a big city like that. And we sat there wondering what to do. I suppose all of us asking the Lord for help. And a man stuck his head in the window and says, "Well, what on earth are you doing here?" It was a man that Dick had worked with at Houghton, and he lived at High Point. He said, "I go for a walk every day, and usually I come downtown and walk around, but I've never gone on this street before." He was amazed, and we were too. He had somebody tow us home, and we stayed there all night. And Dick worked on the van, and he found it was just some simple thing wrong with it. And he found it, and we went the rest of the way home with no problem. But just another reminder of how good God is to watch over His people. We got home. Dick and Jerry stayed there overnight. Kathy had come down and got the house ready and bought a few groceries so I'd have something to eat till I could go to town. and Dick and Jerry left the next day. A robin had built a nest, and there were eggs in it, right over my kitchen door. That was a nuisance. She was so mad every time I went outside, and she'd go out and scream and yell and sit on a branch and call me everything. But I couldn't help it. I had to go in and out that door. I made new curtains for my living room, and Deb papered the one wall that I had papered in there. That was my Mother's Day gift. About this time, the robins left from over the door, and was that a relief? Graduation came upon us, and we went to the baccalaureate. It was so nice to see Isaac in his cap and gown. Pat and Bob were up. The kids went together and got me a mother's ring. Had a stone for each different kid's birth stone. Kathy and Jerry and Isaac went to Harris Island for David's graduation from basic training. That's nice. I went when Jerry graduated, and it's a very impressive ceremony. I enjoyed it. We had a party for Isaac, and David came home after the graduation. Debbie made a pretty cake, and there was just family there and the preacher. That was nice. The cake that Debbie had made had a graduate on it and two little soldiers. It was for both the boys. It was a nice party. Camp and conference was upon us again. Cindy and Kevin were going to be at camp this year, so that would be interesting for us to hear. It was bad weather some of the time, very, very hot, 106 one day, and hot around all summer. In fact, they said cows and big flocks of turkeys were dying from the heat. It was unusual. One day the wind came up real strong and blew down the big tent. No one was in there because they'd been ordered not to go in there when the storm was coming up, so there was no one hurt. They had to have the meetings over in the church, over in the Victory Highway Church. So that was nice. Everybody went in there with loads of cars and went over there. Pat and Bob went on a trip through the West. They had a 3 weeks trip, and they had a real good time, they said. They went up through Michigan and Minnesota and that area. They hadn't ever been there, and they knew different people along the way where they stopped to visit, and it was a nice trip for them. We went to Bath for Scott's wedding. Kathy and I rode down with Dick and Jerry. That was a nice trip. We enjoyed. It was a very pretty wedding. We enjoyed that. The reception was very nice too, and we all remarked about it. The cake was so nice. Debbie did that, but it was a little different, and it was a very nice wedding, and I was so glad I could go. When we got back, it was time for the summer picnic. We'd been wanting to have a shower for Beth and David like we did for the other kids, and there didn't seem to be any time, so we decided to have the people bring their guests for the shower at this picnic. That worked out good. Debbie made a little cake just special for that. And we had, and later in the afternoon after the picnic dinner, we had it. And she got nice gifts, and it worked out that we could do it that way and not have them have to all make the trip down again. About this time, Deb and Phil got their first ostriches. That was interesting. They're such odd-looking creatures. It was fun to watch them. The water didn't work good in our house now. The pump kept going off and on and off and on, and we had to keep turning the pump off because it was going to wear it out. And they dug up different places to see if they could find out what could be causing it. And they about decided that the pipe itself had rusted through. That pipe from the spring to the house was an iron one, and it had been put in 1947 when my father put it in. So, and this was 1995, so it had a right to be rusted through. So they took a plastic pipe on top of the ground and hooked it at both ends like it would if it was underground. And it worked perfect, so then they knew that that was it. So Jerry got people there and they dug a ditch and put it in, and then that was just perfect ever since. It was time now for David's wedding, the last of September. And Jeremiah, Andy and Heidi's little boy, was going to be ring bearer, along with Diane's little girl, who was Flower Girl. They looked so cute. Andy and Heidi came Friday night to stay all night so that Jeremiah could be here for the rehearsal. It was so nice to have Andy and Heidi and the kids there for overnight. I just enjoyed that so much. The ceremony was very nice and the dinner was great. Hour of the reception, I sat with Juanita, so that made it nice. I had someone to visit with. And Kathy filled our plates and brought them to us because it was, there was a long line, of course, like there always is, and neither of us felt like standing a long time, so that worked out real nice. It was a good time for both of us. Once a year, Evelyn takes Charlotte and I down to Appalachian to visit Helen. That's near Binghamton. We always enjoy that. We go down and spend a day mostly with her. We go out to eat somewhere and have a nice visit, and then usually Evelyn takes a roundabout way home, so it's usually long toward evening time we get home, but it's just an enjoyable day. I always look forward to it, and so does Helen. She always likes it so well, too. In Bath, they had a torch-bearing program like they do when the Olympics are going to start. Eric was the one who carried the torch for a given distance. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, of course, if you were at the real one, but this is one that they imitate. They have everything just the same, the police cars and official cars, and preceded the whole thing. And then each of them stood in line, and they were handed the torch, and they had to run and carry it to the next place where somebody else took it. And it was very enjoyable to watch, and I was so glad I could go. Chris came and picked me up and took me down. The kids are so nice about doing that. to see that I get to these interesting things. Erin was retiring from the police force in Bath. She'd worked there 20 years and was now retiring, and it was they were having a special party for her at this time. It was real nice. They gave her a lot of different gifts and said real nice things about her. I went and enjoyed it a lot. I was so pleased for her. She had worked so hard there and tried so hard to do a good job, and people always said what a good job she did. It would be better, though. She was getting awfully tired and having to drive home late at night and so forth. She works a night shift. We had a deep, deep snowstorm. I was completely snowed in. I said it didn't matter to me. I wasn't going anywhere anyway, but they came and shoveled me out in case I needed to go somewhere. We had Thanksgiving at my house, the same as we usually did. We ate at 4 o'clock this time in the afternoon, so the men could hunt all day. Sometimes they stop, or usually they stop at noontime and eat, but this year they wanted to do that. I was getting ready for Christmas and getting things bought and made and packaged and so forth. And they said they were going to take me out to eat, and we went to a place in Bath. I don't remember the place we went that time, but it was very nice. And Dan and Matt and Elizabeth and Deb and Phil and I. And we walked in there, and there was a table set with the whole family there. Pat and Bob were even there. They had just driven up, and they got there in time to join the supper. Kathy and Jerry were there, and Bruce and Aaron. The whole family was there. It was very nice, and I enjoyed it a lot. And it was a nice surprise, because I hadn't even thought of their doing that. We had the get-together before Christmas this year, the 23rd. That was nice. They had 41 there this time. Most of the family got there. It's always the case that some of them, the kids are sick, or some of the family want to visit the parents on the other side of the house and so forth. So they aren't always all there, but it was nice. We had a nice crowd, and we had a real good time. Christmas Day I spent at Debbie's like I always do. It's so nice to be there. And we always have a good dinner. I enjoy it all. Then I went back home. It was very cold, a long session of very cold weather. Sub-zero most of the time, and deep. I tried to get everything ready to leave. Chris came up and stayed a while. I always look forward to her coming and seeing her. Christmas Eve, Kathy took me to the Christmas Eve, or New Year's Eve service at church. That was nice, always is. We played games and watched a movie, and then gathered around the altar for prayer until midnight. Had another wonderful year. My family are so good to me, and I do appreciate them so much. The first part of January was cold and blustery. Deep snow. 12 to 18 inches. Jared got us plowed out. It was 8 degrees, and I was planning to go to Pat's again. Evelyn came, and also Chris, to say goodbye. It's been so nice to have them and close by and coming in so often. Chris has come up so many times just to spend a few minutes, and I'd love to have her. Bad storm all up the East Coast. Washington, D.C. was all snowed. All snowed in. They had 2 feet there in some places. Dan was going to Pat's, so I planned to ride down with him. We had to postpone our start because the snow was so bad, but we got off okay. The roads weren't too bad. They were all plowed. In Pennsylvania, the road was real rough. They didn't get down to the surface of the road. They just sort of plowed over the top. Dan is such a nice person. He was so thoughtful and did so many things to make the trip nice for me. Pennsylvania and Maryland there was a lot of accidents. Those people aren't used to driving with deep snow, and so there was a lot of people over the bank and like that. But we got through fine. We didn't have any trouble at all. Of course, Dan's used to deep snow, so it wasn't anything new to him. We got to Pat's about 9 o'clock that night with no problems. The schools were all closed there because there was 2 inches of snow in Greenville. There had been deeper snow before that. This was a bad year for snow all over the East Coast. Dan got up the next morning and went to work with Bob and Scott. Ingrid announced that she's going to be married in August, so that was something for us to begin to plan for. Church was good as usual. Mrs. Bell's class is always so interesting. I guess I've told you before, she was a missionary for a long time, and she knew the Bible so well. It was always interesting in her class. Then a warm spell came, and the snow was all gone, and we heard that Jumbo's mother had died. She was 97, Geneva. Such a lovely person. There was a nice storm then, with no electricity. Ingrid was in a Passion play in Atlanta. We went and stayed at Steve's house. The play was very good, very authentic, and followed the Bible so completely. I had a good visit with Steve. I hadn't seen him to talk to him very much before that. Dan left to go home. We miss him. It was fun having him around. He was going to go as far as Joan's daughter in Pennsylvania and stay there overnight and then on home. It was real nice to have him here, and we enjoyed him. Rachel was some interested in going to Houghton this next year for college. A man from the college came to interview her and talk to her about the college, and that was nice. She enjoyed that. Bruce and Aaron went down to Texas to see Paul and Arlene. They called, and I talked to Paul and Arlene and Thackeray. That was nice. They were going to stay there for some time this winter. So March went by as usual, with just the usual thing going on. For Pat's birthday, we had a party, just the family here. That was fun. Made a cake, and Rachel decorated it, so it was real nice. I keep busy making baby quilts. Andy and Diane's family both had a new baby this year. Deb and Elizabeth came down for Rachel's graduation. She got nice awards, and it was a nice program, just like graduations always are. And then I rode back up home with Deb. We had a real good trip. We stopped at Gettysburg at the Wax Museum and other things we saw there. It was nice to be home. When I got there, the different people stopped in to say, "Welcome home." Nice to be back in my own church again. There were 4 people that had been to Promise Keepers, and they gave their report. That's always interesting to hear. Carolyn Lloyd came early in June. Lloyd always finds little jobs around the house to do to help me. Always so glad to have them come. Camp time was on us again, and I went to camp with Carolyn Lloyd. I didn't stay as long this year as I have some years. I didn't stay the whole time. Paulings all came up to see me, and Colleen is going to Korea to teach English in July. We went to Matt's wedding. That was a very nice wedding. The reception was nice too. I enjoyed it so much. Pat and Bob came, and they stayed at my house all night. Dick came over home with me, and we went to church. Dick taught the adult class. That was nice. And then we went to the Alderman reunion and painted poles. Bruce and Aaron were there, and I rode home with them. About this time, Isaac went to California with 4 other kids. They were just going out and back for the trip. But then Isaac and one of the boys stayed out there. They found work and stayed. Chris's little colt broke its leg, and they had to take him to Cornell to get it set. This was real nice for the students because it gave them a chance to see how to work that, how to set a horse's leg, and it was nice for Chris because she let them watch, the students watch. It was all free, the boarding for the colt and his mother. So that was nice. She thought it was going to be so expensive, but she didn't know what else to do. Nobody around here would set a colt's leg, and he's such an expensive horse. She didn't want him just put down. Robin was in a play in Holton, so we all went over there to see that. That was nice. I went to Teenagers with the Frederick girls, Mary Ellen and Lenora. They stayed in my cottage, and they helped me walk to the meetings and like that. That was so nice. I enjoyed that a lot. Then there was Ingrid's wedding. I went to that with Bruce and Aaron. Kathy went with Dick and Jerry. The rehearsal dinner was very nice. they had special music there besides the regular music that they planned. Trudy and Bob sang together. Aaron played for them. And that was so nice. It was just improvised. They hadn't planned to do that. It was just something that came up. But we all enjoyed it a lot. The wedding was beautiful, too. She had a lot of little girls in it that added to the usual wedding procedures that people have. Rachel came to Houghton and got settled in. She came over to Debbie's once in a while for a weekend, and that was nice. We had the family picnic the first part of September this year, too, later than usual, but that seemed to be the only time we could work it in. But that was nice, as it usually is. There was the regular ones that came. Isaac left for California right after the picnic, too, so we all had a chance to say goodbye to him. We heard that Mabel died just about now. That's Floyd's sister. And Debbie took me to that funeral. Juanita's family was there, and some of Fred's family. People that I don't see very often. It was sad, but something we all had to face. I heard that Isaac was going to stay out in California. He had a job. He and one of the boys that went with him both got a job in the Crystal Cathedral working with the youth. That was real nice. It gave them a good income, and they roomed with two other guys, so four of them were in one room, but then I guess that doesn't bother kids. They weren't there very much anyway. They were busy with the other things they had to do. And he kept calling home, telling us what he was doing and so forth. They started in October getting ready for the Christmas program. It's always an elaborate affair there. And he just enjoyed working in that, working with the kids. He said they were completely different bunch of kids than he was used to.